anybody need the microphone, or can you hear me okay? Okay, sounds good. Well, good evening, my name is Kurt Berner, I'm from the Samuels Group, and we are the construction management firm that's been working with the county for about a year on this project, and we're gonna be presenting you some information tonight. We've had 2 meetings already, we had one in Weyerhaeuser, one in Hawkins, great presentation there, and obviously a great turnout here tonight, so it says a lot about your community coming out and being interested in the project, so I appreciate that. Meetings prior to yours has been great questions, a lot of inquiries about what are we talking about, and I think we're able to give them some data that they may not have had before, and that's our goal tonight. The reason we're having this meeting is to let you know about the project that the county board is considering, and then promote some discussion between you and your county board members. So as constituents, as questions come up, you can have some dialogue with them, and we'll talk about what the next steps for the consideration for the board may be here in the future. So the outline of tonight, we'll have some brief introductions here. We'll get into how did we get here, a little bit of the history of how we got to today. Then we're going to talk about the need, the proposed solution, the tax impact, and then we'll talk about learn more, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Presentation has been taking about 35 to 40 minutes, depending on how long-winded we get, and then we open up for Q&A. So I like to open the meetings and just ask that if we get into the discussion, let's keep everything respectful and respect one another, and that's been great for the prior two. I'm sure it will be the same here for tonight. So the introductions, do you guys want to start on that end?
George Murray, Jail Administrator.
Sheriff Jeff Wallace.
Corey Blair, Adventure Architects, the design team.
I'm Ashley Heath, the Administrative Coordinator, and I'm Jamie Wilk, the Finance Director.
So how did we get here? There's a timeline up here that some of you may be able to read, maybe not. The jail and the need for a jail has been a topic for a few years here for the county. And there was a master plan study that was done, an evaluation facility analysis done by an architectural group a while back that looked at the condition of all of the county-owned facilities and then talked about what the priorities are, the needs for the county-owned facilities. The jail came back as the top priority, and your highway shop came back as number 2, and obviously there were other issues that had come up, but because the jail was the top priority, then the county moved forward with an RFP process, or request for proposals from teams that provide professional services from the construction manager side as well as the design side. So that's how Corey and my group were selected. And we've been working with the county for the last year, a little over a year, specifically with the ad hoc committee that has been working on the jail. I see we've got some ad hoc members here tonight. Do you mind raising your hand for the county board that's not on the ad hoc committee? Girls, this board. So, if you have any questions, they're going to answer them all. No, I'm kidding.
No, which one you two are gonna ask.
That's right. No, they've been very good at asking questions that you may have tonight, challenging us, and obviously cost has been a big factor. How do we get costs down? How do we still meet the needs of what the DOC requirements would be? And then obviously build something or address your solution so that it's something that serves you well into the future. They've done a good job. We've actually toured with that ad hoc committee to a couple of other jails so they can see the difference between a linear and a modular jail. One of the things that we find is that most people that aren't in the correctional side haven't been in a jail. That's a good thing. But it also challenges us as taxpayers when we find out that we have to pay for a jail. And that's what we're hoping to do here tonight, is to give you a little bit of insight as to jail design, jail function, and what are the things that are tied into that. So your jail is almost 40 years old. It was built in '85. It is a linear jail. It has limited receiving cells, and we're going to talk about that as we enter into the presentation here tonight about what those are. You have an unsafe flow from your sally port to your booking area. It's really about the design of where your sally port is and where your intake is. You've got some water infiltration into the building. You've got difficulty meeting the classification that the DOC is requiring. And then we also are dealing with some inadequate spaces for storage, medical area, and programming. You may have received the letter, and the letter really talks about a priority or several items that are there, and classification has been a topic not only in your community but throughout the state. So we're going to spend a fair amount of time on classification tonight, but your building isn't just a classification issue, your building has other issues that are tied back into it, we'll get into the discussion on that. This is a example or a model of a linear jail, and linear comes from line or just has a complete line up those cell blocks. So you see the housing unit that's in blue. Those small rooms that are down the center of that building are your cells. Those are the jail cells where those inmates would be housed. Those small rooms outside of those jail cells are the day rooms. So there is a requirement from the DOC that they don't just stay in a cell all day, they have to have access out into a day room so that there can be space between those two areas, and that's how that is provided in this linear jail. You see where all those stars are pointed, those serve as staff posts. That's gonna be a key element of tonight's discussion. Staff post means that that's a location where a correctional officer has to be staffed or has to be at that post 24/7 while somebody is occupying that portion of the jail. If we start on the left-hand side of that diagram, there's a vehicle sally port there. That's where the squads will come in from the arrest process, and the door shuts behind them, and then they take that individual that's arrested into, should be a pre-booking area. Your jail does not have a pre-booking area, but it goes into the booking area. And then that location is where the booking takes place, meaning that the jail officers will then take that individual from the arresting officer and then go through the booking process to get them to the point where the determination is where they're gonna be held in the jail. Then there's a property storage area. Obviously the changeover when they go from their street clothes to the jail clothes, and the property storage stays there. And then they would go into what we would call that housing unit or the general population. This model is a pod design, and this pod is different in mainly the housing area. This model shows a pre-booking area because the pre-booking area is needed for your intake. You do not have that. But the pod area, the pod is more of a circular design. And if you'll see where those stars are there, a pod is a 3-post design, and that's what the proposal of your solution would be, is a 3-post design pod jail. The benefits of a pod design is really the safety and efficiency are increased just because of the mere design of the structure. If you'll see all of those small boxes or rooms around the perimeter of your building, those of this model, those would be the individual cells. You can see the individual that's in the center, that officer station that's in the middle, that would be master control, and that master control position runs all of your door controls, all of your intercoms, and all of your cameras throughout the jail. They are basically the keeper to make sure that that jail stays secure. In the model back here, that post is at the end of that linear line. You'll see a stark difference between the two. This post right here looks down a corridor or a hallway. It does not see into those jail cells, and it does not see into the day rooms. This model here, that officer that sits in that station, the walls that are around that center officer post are all glass. You can see through that, you see through the hallway, it's a hallway that's around there, and then all of the walls up to those cell fronts are all glass, so that that individual that's in that officer station can not only look at the monitors and control everything that's happening with that jail control, but they're seeing what's happening in the day room and back into the cells. And it's around them in a circular fashion. The star that's on the outside there is a rover. That is still a correctional officer, but they move around that housing unit to do those cell checks from all of those individuals that are in the cells. It is a requirement, depending on the situation surrounding that individual, that they have to be seen every 15 minutes or every 60 minutes, depending on the classification of that individual. The rovers on this model are on the outside here, and they have to move between those day rooms to be able to do the same thing that they're doing in this pod design.
Mention one thing here, these are the day room fronts that Kurt mentioned. This is all glazing, these day room fronts, that's mirrored glazing. So when you have classification, anyone detainee cannot see out. So there's no cross visualization, so if you have male and females in that same housing pod, they can't see each other.
My lovely laser pointer doesn't work on the screen, so I'm struggling with that tonight. To walk you through the intake process, vehicle sally port, again, this individual would then be arrested, brought into the pre-booking. The pre-booking arresting officer works with the jail officer and then bring them into that booking area. The receiving cells, those squares that are in that green box, those are the receiving cells. You currently have 2 in your jail. We're gonna talk about why that becomes an issue with managing your classification and obviously your jail population. But in that location right there is where those individuals stay after that booking process before they enter into your general population. Property storage remains off the booking area, and the thing that I wanted to point out, and my laser pointer isn't doing a great job in that housing, is a cell block is a group of cells that's combined to share one day room. And in that model, we've shown multiple different options. On the bottom right-hand corner there, you can see there's actually 5 cells that share one large day room. Up on the top of the screen, you can see that there is a day room that those will share 2 cells, or we do have some that would just share 1 cell. And that's gonna be key when we start talking about classification, because everybody that is in that cell block has to be the same classification. You can't mix the classifications in those cell blocks. These pods give you multiple classification options. Linear jails, depending on how they were constructed and how they were built, there was a lot of dorm construction back then, meaning that they didn't have individual cells. You would walk into this day room, and the day room would have bunks that are stacked, and they would share a toilet and a shower facility. The dorms are sizable, 8 up to 32, some of them are 40 throughout the state. The complication that happens when we get into classification is that when an individual is in that cell block, if there is no one else that matches their classification, you can't place another inmate in there because you've mixed classifications. So these large expanse dorms or cell blocks now can have one individual that may be filling up 5, 10, 15, 20 beds depending on your jail configuration. This configuration would give you multiple options in regards to classification. The connection that you see on the red line there over to this other box here, this box is to represent courtrooms. There is a safety and security feature in regards to a secure corridor from a housing facility or the housing portion of the jail over to courts. So that inmate has to have a court hearing. You want to have a secure connection so they're not crossing paths between the public or any staff or any individual that's in there that's outside of that jail perimeter. It becomes an extension of the jail. So in this model, that secure corridor would connect over to the jail to a couple of holding cells that would be between or outside of the courtroom. So on their hearing day, they come over to that holding cell, basically an extension of the jail. When they then have to go into the courtroom, they will then enter into the courtroom. Once the proceedings are done, then they go back into that corridor, and then they head back to housing. It's efficient in regards to not consuming a lot of time with your staff. It's also secure, so they're not exposed to the elements that happen or could happen when they're out in the public. So this pod design is what's proposed when we start showing you. This is only an example. This is not your floor plan. We don't show the floor plan of jails publicly for obvious reasons in regards to security issues, but this is a representation to kind of give you an idea of the difference between what you have and what would be proposed. How we got here, there have been multiple items that have been considered or multiple ways to address this jail. And again, the ad hoc committee, we would give them an option, well, what about this option? Well, what about that option? So we went through multiple options. We're going to share them with you in some of the things that were affecting those decisions. But one of the first things that has been asked by your group is, has remodeling been considered? Now, during the Wald report, where they came in and did an evaluation of your facility, the remodel piece they were actually showing, so this would be, I'm gonna actually go through ahead here once you understand what this represents. That long, narrow rectangle up on that site plan right there is actually your jail on the second floor. It's a long line, right? It's essentially a long rectangle. And that's what's represented on this slide here. This colored feature is that long rectangle. You can see that obviously you're not going to get a pod design, so if you do any sort of renovation with your existing jail, it will still remain a linear design. The other thing that complicates the renovation of your existing building is that the sizes of the cells that were built back in 1985 are not compliant with the codes today in regards to the cell size. So if you go in and change or renovate that floor, all of those cells have to be brought up to the appropriate code, and because they need more space, the number of your beds would be reduced from 52 down to 38 on your best day, if you get double bunking approved by the DOC, which that is never guaranteed. It's an approval process that you would have to go through. The other things that tie into that is that because of the structural needs that would have to take place in order to support all of the additional work that would need to be done on that floor, the lower level and potentially some of the upper level may need to be, the people may need to be moved out of that. So you'd have to displace the staff that are in those spaces while you do the renovation. And through the course of that entire process, there is still not enough space in there for the programming that you need for a kitchen, a laundry, or your programming spaces. So the solution is not in renovation. So then there's been questions about, well, can we just keep it the way it is, and then we can add on? And we'll get into that when we talk about that, is keep the jail that we got right now and add on in addition to the existing jail, and we'll talk about that in the future. But the renovation piece is challenging in regards to, you're gonna spend money on something that in the end is actually going to be a reduction in how it can function and operate. So then we started talking about these additions, and the additions were driven around the pod design. Now, the reason for a pod design is that it is a 3-post design, meaning that those posts, each one of those staffed posts, 24/7 has to have somebody there. Those posts are expensive, meaning that every post costs about $500,000 a year to be able to staff that. And everybody's like, why is that? It's 5 individuals, so it's round the clock, 24/7. So those are the individuals that work that 40 hours, the next person works 40 hours, the next person works 40 hours, where it comes in to about 5 staff, is you have to fill in weekends and you have to cover all the holiday shifts. That becomes expensive every time you add a post. So when you go into design a jail, your goal on a jail your size is to minimize the posts as much as possible. And a 3-post design is the smallest design that you're going to come up with to keep it as staff efficient as possible. So in this design, we were looking at that pod, which is up on that top part of the screen. It doesn't give you a fair representation of where that was configured, but that was butting up right against the south side of your existing jail. The reason for that was to take that connecting corridor that we talked about to get into courts and shorten it up as possible, make it as short as possible. This solution here was minimal amount of renovation. There was still some renovations to be able to get into the existing courtroom, so we had to do some configuration to get to an existing connection to the courts, but it was not extensive like other options that were considered. So this was our first go at this proposed location. This option ran past the city, not an official submittal, but it was a consideration or discussion, and it was not well received with the idea of closing down Minor Avenue. So based on that discussion, we went back to the drawing board and started looking at other options, meaning that how do we fit this on your campus without reducing scope? And what I mean by reducing scope is reducing bed count, reducing square footage for the program space, and all of those things that are required to be able to meet the needs of your size of your jail. So this was another consideration. You can see that we moved the housing unit down on the southeast corner. The Sally Port was up on the north side. The flow came into the booking area and then through into the housing unit. This would require some demolition on the very southeast corner of the building, which adds cost, and it displaces other departments that are currently housed in there. And it encroached on 4th Street. 4th Street would be consumed actually across 4th Street, so obviously this was not a viable option. The next one was sliding everything over to the west to do our best to fit it on the block. So again, you can see the pod remains relatively similar. The intake changes. The Sally Port was on the east side. The flow changed. It was a bit clunky in regards to how you get into pre-book and booking. You want to have something that's efficient to be able to get into that space. But this was complicated because we were demoing now even a larger portion of the newest part of your campus. It was getting taken down, and then we were replacing it, so then we had to find space for those departments, and it continued to add costs in regards to the overall solution for the project. Again, we looked at another option of flipping this so that the pod would stay on that side, and it was elongating it a bit. Again, we were putting booking over on the other side. This actually affected the north side of the existing building. There was cost associated with that, and it was encroaching on 4th Street as well. This one here was actually a stack option, so we ended up adding the floor underneath so that the housing unit was going to be up on top, and then that intake and sally port was going to be down below, and it was going to be stacked in that northeast corner. Complication with a stacked solution like that is the moment that you start to add a floor, you start to slow down on your efficiency for that rover to be able to work between booking and all of your other spaces, and it was going to add another post or another additional staff. It was going to be an operational cost to the building. So we moved on to the next option. This was similar, to take the stacking portion away and then do some renovation. The cost in this was compounding in regards to that it was not as cost effective as the other options with the renovation and the way that it fit, and we actually were minimizing our bed count. We looked at this option. This was actually a reduction of beds. Yeah. Okay, we reduced the size of the pod on this one, so we're actually eliminating, I think we were only down to 50 beds on this option, and on this side here, the flow again was affecting what does that front entrance look like to come into the existing courthouse. So here's how we arrived to where we are today. It's essentially taking the first option that we had that was crossing Minor, and we slid it to the south so that that housing is as close as we can get it to the existing courthouse. And we have a skywalk that's elevated above Minor for that connection between the courts and the housing. We did reduce the bed count in this model. We originally started in that 80 to 85 bed count because of the projections in regards to what we saw over the course of your last 10 to 20 years, and there's fluctuations totaling that. This one got reduced down to a 60 bed single bunked option with the ability to double bunk to 75 beds. So it wasn't down to the 50 that was originally there, but this one is a 60 bed option that can be double bunked up to 75. So configuration here, again, housing is going to be on the north-hand side. On the bottom side is where the sally port would be. So that intake sally port happens there, and then the booking and the intake connects into your housing unit. And on the east side of this building would be your jail support, which would be kitchen and laundry. So those were all the considerations. Talk a little bit about the need. The need classification has been a hot topic not only in your community but other communities, because the DOC back in 2014 changed their code, and the code required that your jail staff objectively classify your inmates. And what that means is, as that individual is brought into your jail, it's an assessment of that person's history and their current situation. And what I mean by that is that they have to understand who is that individual, who do they know that's in the jail, who do they know that's in the community, and there are multiple factors that come in. How do they objectively classify? The elements that you see up on here is years ago, back when your building was built, the classifications were male and female, and there was a minimum, medium, and a maximum. Those were the classifications, and that's how they were separated. Many people have asked, why did they make the change in 2014? The DOC made the change in 2014 because your jail population has changed since 1985. And what I mean by that is the individuals that you're housing have different circumstances surrounding them that they did prior. There is a different level of crime or issues of what they're tied into in regards to their condition while they're in the jail. The other thing is that if they're not properly classified, if there is an injury, if there is an abuse, if there is an attack, anything that happens within that jail, and you don't have them properly separated, or you didn't manage that population, meaning the county is liable for that. And what that means from a liability perspective is that individual who is injured or harassed or assaulted or whatever the case may be will take legal action against the county, and it's an ongoing thing, or it will be an ongoing thing in regards to that approach to the separation. So these sub-classifications, and every one of these are fluid, and they differ from individual to individual. And I'm not gonna spend time on every one of them, but I'll give you some examples. So the co-conspirator piece would be if Corey and I were in an event and we participated in something that's unlawful and we end up in jail, we both could be male of a minimum or medium or a maximum classification. However, we could not be housed together, because obviously if we're in that same day room that I shared with you and we're in ourselves and we're talking about what our game plan is, here's what you're gonna tell the officer, here's what I'm gonna tell the officer, and we got a game plan to be able to deal with that. You have to separate those individuals. Now, when we separate Corey and I, and if there is no other male there that meets that classification, whatever cell block that Corey has put in, whatever cell block that I am put in, the number of beds that are in there, we are only one person, but we are consuming multiple beds in the consideration of your jail population. So in the example that I showed you, if it's a 5-bed cell block, Corey may be consuming 5 of your beds, and I could be consuming 5 of your beds. So your jail capacity that was 52, 2 individuals have just taken it down to 42 from that event. And until we are moved out of there, that doesn't change. We have had counties, from when we get into this gang affiliation, or some of those other ties, we have had counties where in a murder situation where they were involved in that, and there were 6 individuals that were involved in that, they brought those 6 individuals in there and they could not be housed with anyone else under one event. And now their classification is completely shot in regards to not having the proper way that things are classified. There are multiple things that come into play, medical conditions. We've got some individuals who have airborne illnesses. That airborne illness, that individual that has that can't be housed with somebody else for obvious reasons, right? Used to be tuberculosis, then we have this thing we hear of as COVID, that emphasized it again. All those things come into play in regards to the medical health of that individual and the separation so that there isn't cross-contamination of those individuals. There's other medical conditions where they may need to have a requirement to have special observation so that while they're right next to that officer station, they're able to see and look at them and take care of them. If there isn't enough of that to be able to separate that and you put them there, there's exposure for liability and not able to oversee them. Mental health is a huge piece. There's a lot that goes into mental health. You gotta understand how they have to evaluate what the mental health is of that individual and how you separate them. And if you get a couple of them in your population, it gets very hard to manage. I'm gonna jump down to suicide watch, and I've said this at the last 2 meetings and I won't share it with you again. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard this comment from public members when we talk about suicide. When they talk about the suicide and why are we doing suicide prevention, I have heard people in the public say, why would we do anything? Let them do us a favor so it doesn't cost us any more money. You can laugh about that, but that is extremely sad. The reason that I say that that's extremely sad is that the event that happens there, if that is one of your loved ones that has made a decision in their life that is not their normal activity, but they make the decision in their life. And while they get into that jail, they understand and realize that they've just failed their family, they have failed their loved ones, and they don't feel that there's no way out. And we have a condition in that jail that allows them an opportunity to take their own life. That's not a good thing. Because the jail is there for those individuals to be disciplined because they were unlawful. The jail should have a location or a spot so that they can correct that action. We're going to talk about programming. They can correct that action and that function in their life so that they don't remain in the jail, and they can clean that up and then become a productive member of society. Now, I will hear comments that will say, there's people who are lifelong jail members, and you're right. There will be people that way. But there is also a percentage of that population that falls into that category. And that's the thing that you got to think about in regards to a jail and what it means in a community. That's why we hold these meetings, because jails don't get a whole lot of support. But I don't think, sometimes we don't understand what happens in the jail and the focus and the reason that the jail is in the community. So we're gonna talk about some suicide things that your jail has that we need to address. Discipline, I wanna talk about discipline. So the general population, that pod that I showed you, that general population there are concrete walls between each one of those cell blocks, there are concrete structures that are there, there's detention glass that's there, there's very solid steel doors that are in there, but there can still be individuals that disrupt that. And what I mean by that is somebody who just is being very disruptive, loud, screaming, kicking, yelling, throwing a fit. What happens in a jail population, and when I talk to jailers, is you get one of those individuals doing it, and if you got 50 people in the jail, it starts to get the others agitated. Pretty soon you start to get this energy within that population, and it can become very, very dangerous for the officers that are in there. And if you only have 2 of them that are in there, and you got 50 people that are getting hyped up, you gotta manage that. And what the discipline means by that is you gotta get them away from everybody else that's in that jail pod. So when I talk to you about those receiving cells, we're proposing to have 8 receiving cells in the proposed project. You currently have 2. That discipline piece gives you the opportunity to pull them out of general population and put them into one of those receiving cells where they're isolated away from all that mass of that general population until they cool off. We've actually got a receiving cell that's in there that's padded, because individuals do harm to themselves because of what they do while they're getting all worked up. And I'm gonna tell you right now that there are people that come into jail and they're on a whole lot of good stuff, then while they're in the jail, they're not on a whole lot of good stuff, and their body's doing things that they don't want it to do. It happens. So the discipline piece becomes very, very important. The bottom one here, all those acronyms, you all know what that stands for, right?
No.
You're right. I don't know what each one of them stand for. But essentially, it's talking about the transgender situation that's going on in our society. And when I get into northern Wisconsin, one of the quickest responses that I get is, that doesn't happen in our community. And chances are, it's probably not real prevalent, right? But the reality is it only takes one situation like that to come into your jail for you to have to manage it. And what that means is you may not agree with it, and I understand that, but you still have to manage it. And what that means is, from the liability perspective, the liability side of that, if it's not handled appropriately, if separation isn't done adequately, and there is an assault that's done there, you are liable because you didn't address that. Now, there's multiple examples that could be shared about how that takes place, but if you don't have the facility to be able to manage that, it puts you in a complicated position, and it puts you in a potential liability component. I spent a fair amount of time on classification because that becomes a hot topic a lot of times. And it's fluid and it's always changing. The reason that I say that is that your individuals, the people that are in jail, somebody asked one time about what's the average length of stay, and it varies. I mean, it varies depending on the situation. Is that your jail population is fluid. Somebody may be in and out of there, and this classification, because one individual comes in, you may have to move other individuals around, and you have to have the flexibility to be able to do so you can manage that population. Your existing conditions, we're going to talk about why you can't accomplish that. The safety, the county liability is huge. I had one county, when we talked about county liability, I didn't know what the response was. That's what we have insurance for. Not the right answer. Because how many cases, how many lawsuits will your insurance company tolerate before you start to pay the premium because you keep having these lawsuits? And then the last one is better programming. This classification piece is the issues that are happening here. We have to give programming space, and what I mean by that, it's essentially a classroom where these individuals who are in jail have to have an opportunity to be able to learn from their errors and correct them to move on, and you don't have the space to be able to do that now. So the need, this one here, I'm gonna go through these. These are on the website if you want to look at some more. You're dealing with a building, again, that's 40 years old. You've got water infiltration issues. You've got exhaust issues from your generator. You've got light fixtures that have water leaking into them. And you've got issues pertaining in regards to the building envelope. these holding cells that are up there, the imagery there, that's those bars. I think the individuals that haven't been in recent jails, that's the norm. They feel that all these bars that are in there, that's that suicide piece that I was talking to you about. Those are no longer used when you construct a jail. Now, there are jails like yours that still have them. The problem that you have with them is those are instant tie-off points. The bed sheet and that bar, hand in hand, that's suicide waiting to happen. The jails now, when they're constructed, we go through extensive details so that there aren't pain points. The hinges on the doors are beveled so they can't hang a sheet on it. The curtains that are in the showers are a tear-away curtain, so when a certain amount of weight or force is on there, they pull away so that those things can't be used as a way to be able to hang themselves. You have these cell fronts, and they're there, and they are a risk and a liability for you for those conditions. 2 receiving cells, you only have 2. And you ask yourself, why is that an issue? You only have 2 receiving cells. When a fresh arrest comes in and you get through that booking process, those individuals have to go somewhere. If they turn to the receiving cell, those receiving cells are full, and you haven't moved them into general population, because you've got to have a 24 to 48 hour period where you watch these individuals, because you can come in and classify them. You put them in the receiving cell, you give a couple of days to see how these people are interacting before you start to put them in with the general population. If you speed that up because you had to pull somebody in, you have exposure of mixing them with individuals that they shouldn't be mixed with. We're proposing that you have 8 in there. If you don't have a place where the disciplinary action can take place, they have to stay within general population. This here is your intake area. It is cramped. There is no pre-book area. You see in the back side there is a body scanner. So I'll get to the corridor here. When you come up this elevator from your Sally port, you do a body scan. The body scan is to see if the individual has anything on them or in them before they go into jail. And then they come through that booking officer station, which is cramped. It's tight for them to be able to get through there. There's things on the desk where if there's a combative situation there, things can be thrown around, they can be used as weapons, so there's enough adequate space there. The corridor on the left-hand side shows you what that linear jail looks like. You're not seeing the sight lines that you would see in that pod jail, so your sight lines are limited. The second picture there, that is the Sally port. There is the Sally port. You get out of the Sally port, you go down this corridor, and then you go into an elevator. That elevator then takes you up into your pre-booking area. You want that to be on one level so that you're getting them from the squad, you're getting them into pre-booking, you're getting them into a receiving cell so that they can cool down, because people that are arrested aren't always happy with it. And now you've got your patrol people who are wrestling with them, and there are events that can happen between there and there. Now, if you are an arresting officer and you are with that individual that isn't happy and you're in this cramped elevator, there is security and there's safety risks associated with that. Your dispatch center right now is coupled with your master control. Not the ideal situation. We're not proposing to change that in this model because of the issues associated with staffing, but your dispatch center and where it's located, it's right off of this entire booking process, and there is one door to get into it. What you should have is a secure vestibule. It's essentially a 2-door anteroom where you would walk through the door to get in, you lock it, and the officer would then have to open it up. Yours is if that officer is just walking out to get out of that room, and that individual who is just being arrested, all they have to do is knock that officer down and they're into your dispatch center to the heartbeat of your county and their emergency response. Not a safe situation. You've got a potential breach there of security. The picture on the left, none of these pictures don't do a great job, but it is a very narrow space for the inmate storage and changeover, not complying in regards to what you need for that. The medical room, it's 1 medical room, which should be 3. You should have a nurse's office, you should have an exam room, and you should have a 3rd room where medication is stored away under 3 locks so that people aren't able to get into the medication. You don't have that to be compliant. The 2 pictures on the right-hand side are talking about an emergency call button. It's supposed to be an emergency call button for the inmates. It's actually outside of the space from where the inmates are going to be able to get to. So it's not an emergency call button for the inmates. These ones here are talking about your court, you're getting to court, the door that gets to court right now. There's actually a lock process where your back is turned to the inmate, it's an issue in regards to security. You have one court holding cell that does not meet DOC compliance, so you're only using one. You have two, but one of them isn't compliant, so you can't use it. And the third one is your court officers, is out in the corridor, and it's exposed to the traffic flow. So, proposed solution, this is a diagram that you'll see in the photo there. The left-hand side is obviously existing courthouse, that's the skywalk over Minor Ave. The building that you see adjacent to the skywalk is that housing, that pod, and then jail support will go to the north. It updates your building systems, addresses a lot of the current issues that you have in regards to antiquated systems. It addresses the inmate classification. It addresses the safety issues. Where we placed this, that was another thing that I didn't talk about of where it was placed, is it gives you the opportunity that if you wanted to purchase the properties, and that's actually been a topic of discussion at the previous two meetings, because people have said, you're doing harm to the neighbors by parking it right in their back door. That may be something that the county board has to consider of acquisition of those properties, because it not only does it alleviate that problem, but it would give the availability for expansion in the future on that side. But if we would patch this over on that parking lot, if you have to do any renovation to that space or relocate it, it doesn't give you the connectivity that you need. This way it would give you an option where you could start to flip the connection if you have to do something with the courthouse in the future. You got a video here?
The Rusk County Board are encouraging your feedback regarding the proposed Rusk County Jail. The two-story jail addition looks to utilize the existing Rusk County-owned property across Minor Avenue to the south of the current law enforcement center. The two facilities will be connected by a skywalk to create a link between jail and the courts. The Rusk County Jail will include a two-level housing pod, along with related support services. At the southernmost end of the block is a secure sally port and building services loading dock. Keeping all of these jail-related functions in one building addresses the current operational and staffing inefficiencies in the current jail facility. By constructing the Rusk County Jail in this location, it allows future generations greater options to address replacement, improvements, or updates to the current county courthouse. The design for the new jail is straightforward, yet weaves in a contemporary style that remains contextual with its neighbors. Rusk County Sheriff's personnel, County Board supervisors, and county administration all provided insights on the design. You can reference the website ruskcountyjailproject.com, all one word, to understand more why this project is essential for the growth and revitalization of our communities. Additionally, a green space across 3rd Street can serve as a community square, accommodating festivals, concerts, and special events for bringing the community together. Please consider making the time to join one of the community listening sessions to learn more about the project and ask any questions that you may have. Thank you.
So we've got some feedback on the video over the last few weeks, some of the feedback. It actually was called Kitty's last name. We've got some feedback about the square across the street. Why are we putting it in there? We got some feedback about not putting those veterans flags up there. Obviously the neighbors' acquisition of the property has been a consideration. And quite frankly, that's why we put that out there, so we get your input. We're gonna take all that input back to the board and say, here's what we heard, right? I'm probably gonna tell them it's hideous. The hideous piece was, that building is proposed proposed as precast panels. And the reason for precast panels is that precast panels are cost effective, they keep costs down. They obviously meet the security component that we need, and they have a long life expectancy in regards to minimal maintenance that's tied back into them. Now, I will share the opinion that precast wall panels don't have the look of a brick building. You're gonna have next to a brick building. I think that was the comment from last night. The reality is that there are some precast buildings that can look rather nice, with different color tones of the concrete precast with some lines that are in there, and it can serve a purpose. But it's good to get that kind of feedback, and we'll share that with your reason that we showed that town square, and I'm sure most of you are from Ladysmith, why you're here today. You see everything that's happening around that market, the market there. It was thought of having a continuation of that. It doesn't need to be done there to meet the needs of the jail, right? But it's one of those things that would enhance that area around that location that's there. It'll be something that the board will have to decide on whether that's part of it or not. But the skywalk is another one. People have asked, why do we have a skywalk in there? The skywalk is in there for safety and security. I personally, I've always said, and I shared that with the city, I shared it with the county, I'd love to see if it's pushed right up to the building. I know that means we have to shut down the street, but it gives you the best safety and security to be able to address that. Now, there's been people ask, can we just take the skywalk out? It would not be a recommendation of our team to do so, because then you would either have to get those individuals in a squad and drive them from the Sally Port of the jail around the block to the Sally Port of the courts and take them up. Big staffing issue. Individuals said just make them walk across the street. Walking across the street exposes those individuals, and it is a liability, meaning that they could have, because those court hearing dates are public knowledge. So loved ones from somebody that's assaulted could say that they're gonna take the law into their own hands and take care of that one crossing the street. You can figure out what form of action that may look like, because it can take all sorts of forms. But if you have a secure corridor, it removes that opportunity. So, those are some of the things that we heard about that solution, and the feedback has been good. Probably why you're all here tonight is the tax impact. So the way this has been derived is this project that we showed you, the video, $38.5 million, all in, outside of if you're gonna buy land and all that kind of stuff. The project that you saw there, the building, the components is $38.5 million, priced in today's dollars. Now, if you wait a year or two, I'm gonna talk to you about what that looks like, because obviously prices go up. The $38.5 million was given to Baird, who is your financial advisor. Baird then looks at your county, and they look at your county in multiple ways. But one of the biggest things is your equalized value and what that would cost your mill rate to increase if you borrow that $38.5 million. This borrowing is a 20-year borrowing, meaning that it will be paid off in 20 years. So we like to break this down from a mill rate perspective of what's your increase per thousand or $100,000 of your property value. So this is 73 cents per $1,000, or for every $100,000 of property value, your taxes would go up $73 a year, for $6.08 a month. The average property value in Rusk County is $173,750, which equates to $10.57 a month. Now there is another line over there that's CIP. Those are capital improvement projects, and that is a decision that would be made by the board if they wanted to borrow for other smaller projects, because a lot of times the question comes up is, man, that's a lot of money, can the county borrow that much money? The reality is, the county can borrow a lot more money than that. Not wise to do so, not recommended to do so, but you have the availability to do so. But understand that if you borrow more money, it does impact your taxes. So if you do borrow for other CIP projects, your taxes would go up. The CIP that is showed there would be borrowing $3 million every other year to address your CIP projects, and that is a tax impact if those CIP projects are approved by the board. So the next sheet, if you've been on the website and you've kind of taken a look at it, there's a bunch of numbers in there, and what this sheet is showing you is a strategy to do a borrowing over multiple issues, meaning that if you decided to move forward with the project, you may not borrow at all. More than likely you wouldn't borrow it all at one time, because you wouldn't need it all at once. This is gonna take about 2 years to build. So we give them a proposed draw schedule of what the contractors would charge us to build the building, and we give that to them, and then they do an evaluation of when's it wise to borrow the amount of money in the first year, the second year, and the third year. And then they tie that back into the interest rates. The principal and interest on this entire borrowing, the borrowing is $38.5 million. What you would pay in principal and interest is $61.8 million over the life of the borrowing. It's factored at an interest rate between 4 and 4.5% on the CIP and the jail borrowing. Those are conservative numbers in today's. I've been part of borrowings recently that have been under 4 for counties, but they put some conservative values in that. And the other side of that coin in regards to those borrowings is those borrowings then would be a decision as to the financial advisor. I've had some where the interest rates would drop. Those interest rates are locked in. So when you do a 20-year borrowing, let's say you did your borrowing at 4%, they're locked in for 20 years, they will not move. But if the market changes and you see a significant drop of a percentage or two, you can still refinance that and reduce that, which would then help the mill rate piece. So you can still do that just like you would do on your private borrowings. So this construction inflation, the reason that I said that is that counties will have this consideration. We'll talk about $38.5 million, and then you come back a year or two from now and say, yeah, $38.5 million is what we wanted to do. Yep, you could have done it back then, but 5 years from now you can't. Commercial construction inflation averages between 5 and 10%. I just showed you these 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the impact. You know, if they all started at $38.5 million, that highlighted area is 10 years from now. The same exact building built 10 years from now with a 5% inflation is almost $60 million. The same exact building with 8% inflation is $76 million. So you can see how quickly that starts to compound. And what counties typically will look at is that you will never get ahead of that if the interest rate is lower than it. And what I mean by that is that every year that you delay it, if that interest is at 4%, you just lost 1% interest. So building it now makes the most sense. Now we're in a condition here where people will say, because I'll tell you that inflation number of 8% over the last 3 years is laughable. They had huge jumps over the last 3 years on projects that we just got hammered on. Now inflation has somewhat leveled off. It was like this. We are still seeing price increases, but it's not to the level of what it was over the last 3 years. But some people say, well, we'll just wait. I was told last year that this was all going to come back down. It would have been. It's not come back down. It hasn't come back down. And I'm going to tell you what's driving it on the construction side is as inflation went up, individuals' wages went up. And quite frankly, that's a good thing, right, for those workers. But the reality is that those wages aren't coming back down. And when you look at a construction project, it's labor intensive. So that's one piece of the puzzle that you're not going to see come back down. So you're banking on a material piece that if you want to see the significant swing, you may see a drop here or there in some of them, but you're not going to see it across the board. I only tell you that is that inflation and having the prices go up is something that historically happens. Construction prices continue to increase each year. To learn more, we keep track of the website. There's been a lot of activity over the course of the last 3 days. So some of you have been in there. Thank you. I think that's good. Get in there and dive in there and look at what's on the website. If you don't know it, it's www.ruskcountyjailproject.com. You have to put that into your address bar. If you put it into Google, you won't find it. So put in the address bar, you'll be able to get in there. The key thing that I've been telling all of the people that have attended these meetings is on the very end tab of that website, of that homepage, there's a contact us piece. In the contact us, you can then put in your information. If you want to be anonymous, you can. But the questions then come through us, and we disperse them to the sheriff. A lot of them have been driven towards the sheriff or us. But we will plan to present all of those questions or comments that were made from you on the website to the county board when we bring them the summary of how these public meetings have went. So I encourage you to do so. If you don't want to use the website, you've got the contact information for your board members. Feel free to reach out to them. Now we're open for questions and answers. Thank you for me being long-winded. I took longer than I did. more people, right? Yes,
I just question the, population assumptions that are made, because our population is really not growing up here.
Sure.
And I assume it's gonna go down, from what I've seen from projections. So I wonder if the whole plan could be downsized a little bit.
sure, great question. And that's come up at every one of the meetings. I'm assuming you're talking about the population of Rusk County in general, yeah. The population in the community is not a direct correlation to the population in the jail. The reason that I state that is that you will have some people who are parked in your jail that aren't residents of Rusk County because of the choices that they made while they were in Rusk County. So the way that we track that is looking at your ADP over the course of the last 20 to 30 years. And I will tell you, oh yeah, sorry. Average daily population, so what that means is how many people are in the jail. You have tipped up to 50, over 50 at one time. You've been obviously below 20 at other times, so that's why you go with an average, because it's one of these things, it goes up and down. And be very, very candid with you, it isn't just your county, where I see other counties. What drives a lot of that is who's in office. Who's in the elected offices and what their philosophy is about who should be in jail. So you have to be prepared for those fluctuations depending on what happens with that. So there's a tie into that. So I agree with your question about, we actually were north of 80 at one point, and through the discussion here, there's been consideration of getting to 60 to 75. We are actually looking at a design option. We haven't flushed that out yet. That may give you an opportunity without adding additional posts in the future, that you could add some beds to give you a little bit more life of your jail. We've got to work that out if the project is approved, but that is something that we're considering. It's a great question. Yeah.
Why wouldn't you consider, say, Sawyer County, Taylor County, Rusk County, Barron County, combine all these counties to one facility and building one larger facility? And let everybody pay for it instead of just Rusk County?
Yeah, currently, and that came up at one of the other meetings, currently there are no regional jails in the state of Wisconsin. There are 2 counties talking about it. But you would look at each one of those individual jails, and then you have to identify where is it being placed, right? Who's paying for it, and then what are the ties back into that? Most of the time, those discussions don't go real far in regards to the responsibility, the cost, the maintenance, the things that are tied to that. The other thing that's complicating that is where are the courthouses that they have to see, and transport starts to become a large issue. And we'll get into that transport piece when we talk about our county. But it's not something that has been a solution in regards to those elements.
Could you make it a federal prison and let the whole federal government pay
Yeah,
for it?
make that. Yeah, ma'am, you're next.
My question isn't so much about money, but the safety issue, why do we need so many more beds? Like, why is crime going up in Rusk County? I don't know if that's been addressed by the county board at all. And also, you talk about safety, and I have 2 safety concerns. One, adding so many more criminals so close to a school. Just a couple blocks down is our junior high and elementary school.
Sure.
And 2, the transgender issue. What happens when a biological female and a trans female commit the same level of crime? They're now in the same cell. Obviously that transgender will be stronger than the female, so where is the safety there? Are they going to be separated, or will she have to actually be in a room with a biological male?
No, and I knew we'd get here.
So actually, I'd like the school addressed first. I'm more
Sure.
concerned about the children than the people in the jail cell themselves.
Sure. Let's go back to your first question. I think the first question was why are we putting so many more beds in there?
Right.
Your bed count right now is 52.
Mm-hmm.
We're proposing to go to 60.
Mm-hmm.
And if the DOC will approve it, you would have double bunk to 75.
But has there been a discussion about why crime rate in Rusk County is going up?
So I'll answer that in two ways.
Okay.
Your main issue is not bed count today, it's classification.
Okay.
So what we're proposing is that a jail that only has a handful of classifications will have nearly 20. I mean, we're gonna have 18 classifications in the housing unit alone, and then we're gonna have 8 receivers that are there. So that your bed count isn't going up by much, right? Day 1, it's going up 8 beds, and then you can double bunk in the future to 75. So the bed count is, you're essentially looking to give you more classifications, more rooms to hold them, so that the situation that you were talking about with the male,
Right,
the male that claims to be a female
right,
and the true female,
right,
they will never be homes together.
okay,
And the part that you struggle with is some of those individuals will change their mind.
right,
So they may be in there and then they change their mind, so how do you manage it? You've gotta have a way to be able to separate that.
okay,
The school piece is a unique question, and I'm not saying this just to be short,
mhm,
but it is literally across the street from the current jail. So it's not any closer to the school per se.
well, my concern there was bringing in, when you're talking about expanding the jail, bringing in more criminals at maybe like a higher rate of like the level of crime they commit, like more violent
Sure.
offenders, like will we be bringing in people from other counties?
It's a
and
great
stuff like
question, and it was actually talked about at the county board level about, will we be bringing out of county in for revenue?
Right.
That's not why the building's being designed.
Okay.
Now, you will more than likely have the opportunity to do so. That will then become a decision of the sheriff to say, are we going to bring individuals in?
Mhm.
More times than not, the individuals that you house out of county are those good inmates, if you could put that tag on them.
Right.
But you're not bringing those severe individuals in there, but, yeah, it's not the intent to bring multiple people in, that's not the basis of the town. Put hand up here next, I think. Sure.
On the skywalk, why can't they just do video to the courthouse
So,
and not have to be in court per se?
so they do, video is something that's done quite often. The reality is that individual, that inmate, has the legal right to ask to be seen in person in court. We can't just dismiss that and say everything has to be video. They have to have the opportunity to be seen in court. That is their right to be able to do so. So there is video that's done, and there will be accommodations for that to take place.
And how long are inmates in the jail?
That fluctuates. I mean, we've got some that are there for over a year, right? You've got some that are in there for mere days.
Almost 3 years.
Yeah. They're only supposed to be in there a year, but there's ways that gets extended.
Why they should be prison then?
Yeah.
You've done cost comparison with the butting up against the current facility versus the skywalk, and I didn't hear those figures, but I wanna point out a classic example. Cemetery Road by Sheldon, has a railroad crossing on it, and for years, people used to observe the trains, and if there was a train going across, they would wait. Well, the railroad decided that that was an unsafe crossing, and they closed it. All of those folks that live 1 block south of where it was closed now drive around. I understand and appreciate the folks in Ladysmith, but the worst case scenario would be a half a block each way. In Sheldon, when we drive around that road closed, they closed the road. So I would suggest, let's do the cost comparison, let the building do there's a legal term where you annex or you grab some land for the benefit of the most. And I think Ladysmith, with all due respect, would probably learn fairly quickly, as we did in Sheldon, to drive around.
Sure. No, I appreciate the comment, and the skywalk has about a $3 million price tag to it, so it's expensive. It's gotta be detention area, there's a lot that goes into that. I will tell you that discussion has happened, and we will bring that up again. I think that's been a context, and it's a matter of feet, right? And there's dollars associated with it. It's the longevity of what is that decision. There have been a part of projects where we've closed streets, and what you're talking about has happened.
Eminent domain is the term.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to do that. I think you could work that out, but we'll let the group know. Sure. Did you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah, in 1985, when that jail was built, I was a young person, I remember it. It was state of the art, right? I mean, it was the best jail we're ever gonna need for the rest of our life. I had the opportunity, George took me around there the other day, showed me the jail, I really appreciate what he did. How long until the DOC, because obviously they can just change their mind and make up new classifications, how long until they decide the jail that we're gonna pay $62 million worth is not good enough, and now we gotta do something else? But firstly, secondly, you said the elevated design is not good for the rover, but that's what we're going to, correct? No. You said there's two elevations in that.
So in the housing pod, the cells in the day rooms are 2 stories. Around that area is open, the officer station is elevated to to a certain point, so he can see both levels.
Okay.
So it's just one post.
Well, the first one, how do we know the DOC isn't gonna change their mind, say, we gotta, it was like Dungeon, I wouldn't work in there for 10 minutes where they work, honestly, it was, you might as well be in jail, but how long till they turn that and say, well, it's not good enough anymore, let's flatten this and build another one?
I don't have a perfect answer for you on that, but I can tell you right now that the pod design has been in use for about 25 or 30 years on certain campuses, and it still serves its purpose because of its flexibility and what you can allow it to be able to do into that space. I do want to touch on the classification piece because this term unfunded mandate from the state has come up, like the DOC is just dropping the hammer on the communities. This code was put in place in 2014, so it's been around for 10 years. And you guys have been out of compliance for some time. And I've asked, people who have asked, why are they doing it now? Well, how long should they let you go, right? How long should it be? It's been 10 years. So it's one of those things where I understand that component that's tied into that. I don't have a perfect answer for you. I can tell you that structurally, your building will be here 40, 50 years. You will probably have to do updates. I can tell you on those jails, what happens in jails right now is that 10 years from now, you will see that cameras will have to be replaced because technology changes. The way that's designed, it's an easy change because all of the raceways, and I didn't show you it on the backside, the chase that goes around the cells, so you can actually get in there without having to be in the jail space, pull the cameras out, and put new ones in. So that sort of thing.
Wait a second, I have one follow. Where I saw the bars, you talked about people potentially hanging themselves, that would obviously be a horrific tragedy. But I only saw one spot there was bars, and maybe I didn't get, is there other spots in the jail there's bars?
The whole north end is, it shows you on the camera, those are all bars.
Okay.
Inside the cell itself and in the day.
And if we ever had a problem with that, I mean, could those not just be replaced with glass? Or,
So, Corey, there you go.
and one follow-up to that. You said all these options you have, we didn't get a price tag on any of those other ones.
Okay, yeah, the other ones that I was showing you, they ranged anywhere from 36 to 48 million. So there wasn't any of them where, hey, let's take that one, it's 15 million. What you run into is that because of the square footage that's required to be able to get to that, is the configurations and remodeling that are what's driving it, because you're not seeing a huge swing in the massing of the building.
Getting back to changing up the bars into just glazing seems like a simple fix. Once we start touching those, they kick into the new codes and we have to update everything. Currently, your cells are undersized for DOC as well as the building codes. They increase. The room sizes have to also increase. And also, that's just one aspect of it. You're still gonna build in your jail. You're still gonna have those security issues as well as for visibility, your post. You're gonna have additional posts because they have to still make those rounds. And you're still not getting the program or anything else. And hence, once you do that renovation and everything else kicked in, you don't have a kitchen, laundry needs to be aspected, programming has to increase. Any remodeling on that second floor of the jail kicks in first floor, everything, the police department and the sheriff's office, county boardroom, all of that has to be updated to current building codes.
Like I say, when you took me around the place of the dungeon up there now, it's really not ideal. Even as a work site.
All right, I saw a bunch of hands. I don't want to miss anybody. I don't remember who was first. I'm gonna start over here, ma'am. Yeah, go ahead. You.
If I understand correctly, when you have somebody in one of the cells and you've got your day room or exercise or whatever, if somebody's in that and they're not at the same class, they have to be the same classification, or else 5 cells are used for one person? Okay. What about rotating the time that they're out in the day room? Is there any possibility of that in order to utilize those cells but not commingle with people?
Yeah, the day room, the way the DOC code reads is that day room or that cell block is per the classification. You can't have somebody locked up in the day room, and that's considered a mixed classification. So the way we've been addressing that is you'll see that those cell blocks, we're making them smaller and smaller. So you're not seeing any that are huge. I think we may have one that's 4 or 5.
Yeah, we have 4 and then go down as little as 1 cell. per day.
So it addresses that, so that we don't have to deal with those.
So if somebody is in a cell, nobody else can be in another cell because of the day room?
Correct, they're all connected, so this cell block,
Under a different classification, they have.
Yeah, I
to be
understand that.
this cell block here would be one classification, this one would be one classification, up there, those. would
Yeah, I
be-
understand that, but you've got all those empty cells. Can they see in the day room, or can they communicate it from the cell to the day room?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that doesn't sound great.
Sir, you were next?
Yes, when sundown comes along and you flip on the lights, for better term, how much light pollution is there gonna be from black down?
I guess from the outside?
Yeah, exterior.
No, we'll have lights around it, but it's not gonna be anything different than going down the streets now. So if there's no windows on the outside of the housing pod, daylighting, we have DOC has a code for getting daylight to the inmates. So we have skylights up above, and that's transferred all the way down.
And at night, there's no extra lights or?
There'll be lights on the building, just like any other building like you have now at the current, government
It
center.
won't look like a stadium, it'll just be a.
It's not like a prison system where you have these high mast lights. It wouldn't be.
All right, I'm just gonna stay on this side, sir.
Is there any provisions for juveniles?
Juveniles are not housed in here. Yes,
What's the expected life expectancy of the new building, the physical expectancy? And then of the old building, likewise, how long is that expected to last? And what will you do with the part of the building that's vacated?
so currently, right now, there is no plans for the reuse of that jail space other than the connecting corridor that we talked about, to be able to get into courts. The life expectancy of your structure, I mean, just like your courthouse structure that's there, I mean, it's 40 years, it's still gonna be standing there structurally, right? You're gonna have to invest in, and then this is a piece of the puzzle, is that when you build a new building, you've gotta be able to maintain air handling equipment, furnaces, chillers. Those things I've seen have a 25 to 30 year life, and then you're gonna have to work on a replacement, those sorts of things. But the structure will be there for 50 years. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So.
I will get to everybody.
Okay.
I don't want anybody to think that we're gonna overlook it.
Sweating, getting my workout back
Yeah.
here. So with the $38 million, is that covering any other costs other than the jail? Or is there other upgrades going on within the facility, with the old structure of the building? Or is it all that 38 million specific to the jail?
It's the jail and then the renovation that would be in the old building to connect us to the courts.
Okay.
So all construction costs would be included in that $38.5 million.
And so what kind of renovations would that be, like the part that isn't going towards the jail?
It's essentially just a secure corridor that goes through the existing building and connects over to the courts. So there would be demolition of some walls and then the connection of this court.
So we're not adding offices or
No.
remodeling anything over
No,
that section?
correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I had a question on your math as far as the tax levy.
Yep.
I did a rough calculation and the most I could figure is pushing like $5,000 for every man, woman, and child in the county. And, you know, there's a lot of problems there at the jail, but, you know, most of the households in Russ County have those same issues. And, you know, we work within a budget, you know, all our families, but, how does that calculate to $70 a year, but you do the math, you divide $60 million by the, residents, and it's pushing $5,000.
Well, you're paying it over 20 years.
Yeah, I know.
So that's what you gotta understand. And I want you to understand this isn't my math, I'm just a dumb construction guy. Barry put that together, and it's based on, what your equalized value is from that repayment component that's tied into that. So if we do simple math and say, this many people is paying off this amount, you're gonna have that number. They've evaluated that per the property and what they're gonna pay per $100,000, right? So you gotta understand that $73 is per $100,000. So if you got somebody who has a $500,000 property, they're not paying $73. They're paying 5 times that amount. So that's where that separation is in regards to, or the way that it's being handled with the taxpayers. Yeah, I forgot, we have the money.
Okay, so that
that is the maximum amount of increase that you will see in your taxes. But when we issue debt, and what our debt projection is on that, is trying to keep people's taxes as consistent as possible. So most of our existing debt service that we have right now will be paid off in 2029. So we'll keep the levy consistent. So after 2029, there's going to be more debt service being paid in regards to the jail. So you will be paying more on those years than the 73 cents or whatever, but it's going to be, it'll be reduced by the amount that's coming down. So the debt that's falling off will be reduced.
Okay, so that caused a bunch of hands. Yes, sir.
That sky bridge that you're gonna be putting up, that's gonna be lighted all night long, right? So you're gonna have this flat.
There will be no glass in there. That, we can't have glass in there because it's obviously a detention component. The imagery there may look like that is, but that's gonna end up being exposed, yeah.
Have they considered going under?
Well, we've actually done that in some situations. The thing that complicates matters there is there's a bunch of utilities.
But they're remodeling minor avenue.
Understand.
So, I mean, while they're doing that, can't they combine the two construction?
Yeah, the tunnels, historically, they become a maintenance nightmare in regards to what that configuration looks like for water infiltration and those elements that are tied into there. And the cost offset, you're not gonna see much savings in regards to the two of them. By the time you reroute. Got it. Yep, understand that. We can definitely let the board know that for consideration. Yep. All right.
You said the pod system is so much more efficient, you can save a person per shift or 5 people. Is the $500,000 a year that we're gonna save been projected to come out of the sheriff's department budget since they won't need these extra people?
When I stated that, that was one of the options where we would actually have to add a post. Right now, what we're doing with this design is we're having the post stay the same. We're not adding any more, but we're not taking any away.
So we're not any more efficient than we are right now. I mean, you're saying it's really efficient, but.
It is efficient, and I know where you're going with that, is I was talking about if you would keep the existing jail, and if you added, if your existing jail sits here, and the quick response was, let's just build another jail over here, another wing over here, at a lesser cost. This here becomes its own staffing component, where you would have to add 3 posts over here. This addition over here would be 3 posts, just like this, at $500,000 a piece. This solution that we're proposing here maintains your staff just the way it is. Linear jails require more movement. The one I was referring to is if we stacked it, we would have to have a rover that would go between the floors. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Okay, you gave us a lot of different plans at the existing site. Did the board, or have you considered at all moving the whole law enforcement center to, for instance, the area on Highway 27 and Dowdy Road? I think there are 17 acres there.
Yeah, that specific site was not referenced. A greenfield site, when I mean a separate site, was discussed. And actually, that separate site is right around just under $40 million. And that was a consideration. The drawback of separating it from courts is now we've just added additional staff time to be able to do a transport between a court hearing and the jail. Now,
Yes, but
one of the things that is.
Couldn't the court and all of that be included there?
Sure, you could, but now the size of the building goes up and it's gonna be more expensive. And there are counties that have made that decision, and they say, we wanna have, been a part of those projects where they say, we're gonna move this entire function to a different location. And that when they do that, it's called the Justice Center, and it would be your jail, your sheriff's office, your court components, and what goes with the courts, the DA, I've seen somewhere child services goes with that. So that would be another option that could be done outside of the location that's at right now, but at a greater scale. We've done one similar to your size, and you're probably looking at something that's about double the amount that we're proposing, slightly under that. So it's a significant increase, because there's a lot of square footage there. But something I can definitely let the group know what was asked.
Well, I just meant that then that would solve the issue that somebody had a concern with the school.
Yep.
And then it also would help with the railroad situation, even though you wouldn't have access east, but you would north, south, or west
Okay.
without railroad
Sure.
interference.
Sure.
But I realize it would be a, but
Higher
maybe the other social services offices and all could stay where they are. I don't know how much more space would be used.
Yeah. Appreciate your comment. Sir, in the back?
So, have you guys considered what would happen with Flannel River Outfitters being in the county building? That's a business that's been there for 17 years.
Yeah, so that discussion came up last night. That building would have to come down. And obviously there would have to be discussion with the group there that's leasing that about what that looks like in regards to relocation of them. That would have to be a decision, a discussion at the board would have to take place if this is approved.
Well, this is the manager of that building, so.
Okay.
Well, we have to have anybody from the county talk to us.
What's that?
And we have to have anybody from the county talk to us, but I
Right,
have a question.
and I think the reason that is the case is that I want everybody to know that there hasn't been any final decisions about this taking place. And until that gets to that point, and it gets further along, that's when those discussions would take place. Yes, sir.
And then mine is towards the county, why is there not a referendum on this?
So let's talk about the referendum. The county board does not have to put this to referendum. The state allows them or gives them the authority to make these decisions. And referendums are a unique discussion because you are in a situation now, and we'll talk about that, where if you decide not to build a jail, you may be forced to a referendum because you would exceed operating costs. On the flip side is that for a building project or borrowing on this, the county board has the authority to make those decisions. And the way that the state of Wisconsin has this model set up is what we are looking to promote tonight is to get the information out to the taxpayers and have that communication between the constituents and the county board members to talk about that. Because here's what happens with a referendum. How do you want to word the referendum? So that the individual that walks into that poll is making the decision knowing all the details. The reason that the county board is elected is because they are given a lot of information through all of their committee meetings and all the things that are tied into that to be able to make those informed decisions based on information that you may not follow up with. Because if you're like me and I'm most taxpayers, I don't even know the individual who is the chairperson of my district. I don't. And I don't communicate with them. And I have them take care of those issues. So if I went to the poll and I said, hey, do you want to spend $38.5 million? And my quick answer is no, I don't want my taxes to go up. And I don't realize that if I don't do that, that I'm going to cause my operating costs to go up because I got to do out-of-county expenses, that I'm going to have to approve a referendum over here to pay for higher operating expenses. So the referendum is a tricky situation, and I tell you right now, that decision has not been made by the board. It's something that I'm sure they'll talk about. So the question has come up at all the meetings.
But your operating costs though would also be a hell of a lot cheaper than $60 million.
Well, let's talk about that, because they won't. Out-of-county expenses is a topic that comes up when we get to this point where people say, let's just ship them out. We have counties that will say, let's just get out of the jail business, meaning let's just shut our jail down. We don't want a jail here anymore. The reality is that if you make that decision, you still have to have a jail here. And what I mean by that is that if you have a fresh arrest that comes in through your patrol, you have to have a place to keep them, you have to have a place to book them, you have to have a place to hold them. The moment that you do that, you have to have the same amount of staff that you have right now. So your operating expenses do not go away. Your operating expenses at the jail right now are $1,895,000 a year. $1.5 million of that is staff. Outside of that, you've got contracted services for medical, you've got contracted services for food, and you've got other items that make up the balance of that $1.9 million. If you said, let's just close down the jail, we don't want to have our general population, we're going to house them out of county, and you have 40 of your inmates that you say we're just going to house out of county, these are the projections, and this is difficult to nail down a firm number, so these are some averages. 40 inmates, 365 days a year, is $65 a day. That $65 a day is a middle of the road number. You can find some that are in the mid to upper 40s. You can find some that are near $1,000 a day. It depends on the inmate, it depends on their situation. 65 would be a fair middle of the road for now. You gotta understand that if you make the decision that you're gonna do this for the extended period of time, you gotta start to calculate that. That number alone for 1 year is $950,000 a year. For 40 inmates at $65 a day. Now you've got transport. The transport cost is the sheriff has to get that individual from the booking area that you would have here in Rusk County to whatever county that you're gonna ship them to. I wanna tell you right now, the other counties do not have to take any of their inmates. They don't. I have one county right now that was housing their inmates out of county, and that county that was holding their inmates, 4 of their jailers just up and quit. They no longer could house those individuals, so they called them and said, don't pick up your people. If you don't have a jail, where are you gonna go with it? So as you continue to go through that process and you identify the transport costs, you may say, let's take them to Barron, because that's been a discussion, because it's nearby. If Barron fills up, you may have to take them to Douglas. You may have to go to Chippewa, you may have to go to Eau Claire. If all those don't take them, you may have extending durations in regards to where you transport. So transport is hard to nail down, but for 40 inmates, if you have 4 trips, meaning you take them there, you come back, you have to go get them, take them to the doctor, you have to take them to a court hearing. A 4 is about an average at the trip cost. The medical side is that when they are at that place, you are only paying for the room and the food. If they have medical needs, they need to see the doctor, you gotta go pick them up, take them to the clinic. That clinic visit is on the dime of wherever you take them to the clinic and you bring them back. So that's the average medical piece that's there. You still have to have your medical agreement because of those individuals who are in your booking area for those needs while you're in that housing component. This, based on 40 inmates, with all of those averages in today's dollars, is $1,249,000. That $1,249,000 you cannot borrow for. It goes on your operating budget. You would exceed your operating budget. That number right there is very close to the 73 cents your taxes would go up to build a new building, your operating budget. You still have to have your current jail staff. That $1,895,000 doesn't go away. If you start to look at this over a period of 40 years, if you take this number, you're 40 years, and you take a 3% inflation factor on all these things, because 3% is pretty conservative of what that inflation would be, in 40 years, it would cost you over $90 million to deal with your out-of-county expenses. So out-of-county, it may have the look as though it's cheaper, when you start to look at all the variables, and these are variables that are averages. And there can be a case where if you have one individual that's $1,000 a day, these numbers are out the window. And we've had counties that have had to deal with that. So out-of-county is not a perfect solution. Anything to add to that, Jeff? Yes, sir, you had your hand up for a while.
With the new jail, will our staffing numbers increase or decrease, or stay
So
the
as
same?
stated before, the staffing numbers remain the same.
Remain the same, okay.
Yep.
So that don't.
Ma'am, you were next.
Just wondering where that 40 inmates came from.
40, I did it because you're based on your average, you've been in that 38 to 40 range, so that's if you ship everybody out of county.
Everybody.
Now, I'm gonna tell you right now, here's what's gonna happen with the situation of the DOC. If you decide that you're not going to build a jail, and you're gonna keep your jail where it's at, the DOC will come in and remove your double bunking component, and they will reduce what your rated bed capacity is. Your rated bed capacity is going to go down significantly, to the point of 18, and then you've gotta have an 85% factor. What the 85% factor is in the jail is that when you have your rated capacity, when you get to 85%, the DOC considers you full. The reason that they consider that is that when a fresh arrest comes in, there's gotta be room at the end, otherwise your jail doesn't serve its purpose, right? So now your number went from 52 down into the low teens, depending on what that calculation looks like. So now you may not have 40 day one, but the reality is if you are in that mid-30s to mid-38s, if you gotta get down to 12 to 15, you're gonna have 20 of them out of county. 20 of them out of county is gonna be half that number, about $750,000 thereabout. Gonna go back to your tax levy, or you're gonna have to cut services on your operating budget. Yes, sir.
You've heard and probably not heard people discuss county just bought the former Marshfield Swimming Pool.
Yep.
What if they move social services out to there, and then take the social services section, which is a pretty good chunk of the courthouse, and turn that into a jail?
The configuration of that facility will not give you the pod design. It will add another linear jail, that's what I was stating. If you renovate that, you're gonna add another linear jail, which means you're gonna add posts, which is gonna add operating costs. So you're gonna spend money to do renovations, but then your operating costs are gonna go up, it will be there forever. More than the new building, because you displace all of those people and you've gotta have a space for them, plus the renovation. Understood.
Also take an aspect of renovating the existing, we will not be able to build a jail in the existing. It will not maintain the structure itself, because of the loads that we're carrying in a jail configuration.
Another hand over there, sir. Did you have a comment? No? Yes.
What are we looking at as far as food service in this facility?
This will have a kitchen inside of it, and it's a,
Could you give us an idea of what's the cost of, ballpark figure as to,
can I take that?
I can, right now, we don't have a kitchen in our jail, we are paying $7 a meal, for our meals. If we have a kitchen, we could probably cut that in half, if not a little more.
but we have to hire staff.
No, we will not. If we have a kitchen, we will hire a company to do the cooking and provide the food and everything. They hire all the people. All we pay is the dollar amount per meal.
So we've been all over the board as
Yep.
far as.
Yeah, and those meal rates with those services, I've seen average between $2.50 to $3, rather than the $7.
3.5 is the last bid I got.
Yeah, I just wanted to say about the financing. We're always at the bottom, poorest county in the state of Wisconsin. I mean, and we got an aging population, dwindling population. Seems to me like the last few years, there's been just tons of money out there from federal and state for Build Back Better, all kinds of things. Have we even looked into seeing what we can get for grants and stuff, different things like that? It seems like we need a good grant writer here.
So, we work with a lot of counties throughout the state of Wisconsin, and there is actually some of the money that you're referring to. There's this $50 million pool that's been out there, and the counties have applied for them for jails. They do not get approved. They're for other services that were there. So, it's always a question, and the dollars that are tied back into that jail bill, it comes back to a service where it falls on the community to be able to deal with that service that has to be handled in their community.
It's an election year, call our representatives.
Understood. Understood. Did I see somebody? Yep.
Going into that, on there, it said all the county board and town boards were notified of this. Our town board was never notified. The only time I got notified was the letter I got in the mail for this meeting.
I don't know what you were referencing about the town board notified.
On the end of there, it said that all the county boards and town boards were notified about this jail. On a recording on the street.
No, what he said is that, county board members and the staff, they were involved in that meeting, county board, not town boards.
No, it said town board.
Okay?
Right on the tape.
I don't believe it said that, but I understand what you're
It didn't
saying.
say that.
The communication, how we did the communication plan for the letters, and I know sometimes that gets some criticism, because some people don't get letters. The way that we've effectively done that when we've done these communications plan is to get the taxpayers' address list from the county and then distribute that to the taxpayers. Those are the individuals who are gonna be impacted. What I have heard in regards to that response is others can be impacted because their rent may go up, and I get that. It's the course of being able to get that distributed. You were next. Yep.
If you got a county board member, isn't he supposed to listen to the people in his district and not just do what he wants?
Yeah, that's what we're promoting here. We're promoting you to talk to your county board supervisors. Absolutely. That's the goal. Yep. And you're next.
Have we heard anything about what's going on with dispatch? What's the plan with dispatch? How is that affecting staffing? Because currently it's jail dispatch staff together. Are we adding staff?
Dispatch, right now dispatch is going to remain a shared post because we're not looking to add staff. And what we're doing with dispatch is we're actually gonna move that down into that booking station. It's a model that's there so that post can be shared. Now, I do believe that that should be something that's considered in the future to be able to separate them. That's an issue. But right now, that's not the plan to be able to reduce costs, but it's something to consider in the future.
Your housing, you've got 40 inmates for 365 days, come up with a nice figure, but have you actually looked at what you'd realistically be looking at housing out of county if you have the, with the different classifications? I know it's not anywhere near 40, that's even higher than the average jail, but if you have actually looked to see what the actual cost would be?
So the tie that's into that number is that in order to get to the classification and the double bunking is removed, you're gonna end up being about 18 to 20 day one. So that's that number if nothing is done. That's what would take place. This would be, if you said we just wanna get out of the jail business, and I just wanted this to be a representation of saying, if you're average of 40, here's what your expense would be. But it would end up being about half of that. Here's what complicates that, is that because you have limited classifications to be able to manage that, that number is going to be a fluid number. There may be days where it's 12, there may be days where it's 25. So you've gotta find an average of what that number would be. It's hard to pin this number down.
So you would increase by about $600,000 a year compared to $3 million? Yeah, $3 million a year for debt service and interest and all of that.
It would be between $600,000 and $700,000, but it would impact your taxes operating. You would pay higher taxes from an operating perspective, and would have to be passed by referendum.
But I'd rather pay increase by $600,000 to operate than $3 million to build a building and operate and all of that. I mean,
okay.
His math is.
Then that's the message that we can share with them. Yep. Yes, sir.
Did you say that the building isn't structurally sound enough if they move social services out of there to support that?
The courthouse is not sound for a jail configuration. You gotta imagine the diagram that we're showing, all those cell configurations, all those walls are grouted solid concrete with a lot of steel, all of that weight, the existing structure can't hold that. It's designed for what its purpose is as far as like offices, etc.
Well, with the current building that was designed to go 2 more stories up, correct?
At that time, building codes have changed, so you can't build, again, the jail on top of that. You may be able to do an office configuration, but on top of that jail, you wouldn't be able to do a jail again with the current codes. Also, remember, if you go up, we're adding more posts, and then, again, the staffing goes up.
There's a hand over here that I missed. Yeah. Yep.
A lot of these more big scary numbers, you can't tell if they're theoretical or real, but an example being your comment about insurance. If we get a lot of lawsuits, insurance will go up and we can't afford it. My question is, how many times have we been sued in the last 5 or 10 years? For inadequacy of the building, for the building.
For anything.
Probably never.
We don't know the number.
Never?
We don't know the number.
Is that a good answer? Have you been to court? Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Who would go to court? Who would go to court if they were suing you? I mean, you're using these justifications for this, and a lot of this, it's never happened before, but we're using it for justification. Is that correct? Is that correct?
I'm not justifying it. I'm just telling you that the liability is there and the potential is there.
Yeah, it was a justification for this.
I was giving
We're trying to save money.
Okay. Next person. Next person.
Here.
Yes. Can we keep the conversations that are on the side so we can hear questions?
It's actually, second or third as far as income is concerned, we are down there at the bottom. And that's not that. But when you're talking about a jail that's gonna cost $60 million, with a county that has a population of 15,000 or less, the numbers are overwhelming to me and
don't specialize in a pod design. The pod design is what's being used in correctional facilities.
I kinda like the idea of thinking outside the box, because, there's so many different ideas out there. This is a wonderful facility, but in this county, for us, it's gonna be a And when you talk about, okay, it's covered as far as personnel, you're talking about more building, more cleaning, more maintenance. And then you're also talking about overtime, what happens to the old one? You eventually tear it down, you repurpose it, if you repurpose it, you have to redesign it to fit some need or other. And then you're talking about parking, where's the parking? And then you're talking about buying a property for this building, and it just kind of continues, but those are normal, but those costs are all there.
Sure. The maintenance is a question that's come up, and I can tell you historically, the utility component of a building that's being built like this averages between $1.50 to $2 a square foot annually for your utilities. The maintenance side of it, this side of a building, depending on what you have for current staff, typically is about a half-time FTE. If you have somebody that's working part-time, it typically goes to full-time, or otherwise they would bring in another part-time maintenance. And the upkeep and the housekeeping is done by inmate workers. But I understand your concern of all the other issues.
Well, when I say outside the box, I've seen hospitals that have been moving. And, we're talking about, emergency, facilities for people in critical condition, ER. And they seem to be able to cover and monitor everyone. So I always think that if there's other ideas out there, maybe you could come up with one.
So from the, what you're stating there would be an increase in staff. So that's something that we would communicate, is that it is, some of the constituents' position is, look at other options, even if it's linear, even if it means it operating both. Is that fair for me to share that with them?
You can share that, because when you're talking about, personnel, you're talking about people that have jobs in this community. And actually, especially at the courthouse around the jail, it's really a part of the community.
Sure. Okay, appreciate your comment. Appreciate your comment.
Roughly, how many square feet is this expansion roughly?
About 46,000.
46,000 square feet?
Yep. Front and the back.
Kurt, let me jump in a second.
Yeah.
As long as I get everybody's attention, if you park inside the gate, you have to exit out this door, and as you approach the gate, pause, the gate will open for you. That's right. You can't get back.
They don't,
you're stuck to your voted farm. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Okay, go ahead. So, I'm a property tax payer, and as probably many people are here, and so we have maybe what, under 15,000 in population in our county?
What I've heard, yep.
What number of the county is taxpayers? What number is that?
I don't know the answer to that.
I believe we have about 20,000 parcels. It does not.
No, people, not how many parcels they own, how many people is this gonna be affecting?
Letters that we sent out, I think it was between 9,000 or 10,000. I wanna say it was in between 9,000 and 10,000. That's how many letters.
So would that, but that don't mean, did you send them if they owned multiple parcels? Did you
We
send?
sent one letter if it was multiple parcels.
Okay, so say these 9,000 people are stuck with the burden of paying for this.
Understood.
And I don't really care for that, because the other people, I hate to be, saying this way, but probably the majority of taxpayers aren't the people that are housed in the jail system, so we're paying for those. How about thinking about upping our sales tax so we hit the other people in our county to pay for it? Why are the taxpayers the only people gonna be paying for this? I think there's other options to jab it to the other people too.
There are limitations of what you can do with the sales tax. I don't know currently where you sit with all that, but.
Yeah, this would be an allowable reason to increase the sales tax, but you also have to keep in mind that, not all of the taxpayers of Ross County live in Ross County. So there are vacation homes that will also be, paying a portion of these taxes.
Well, I don't care, it's still people paying. I'm not a vacation person, you know, I'm just saying, that's why people are ticked off, you know? And we're such a small, poor county, and we're already taxed to death. We already gotta pay how much to live here if you wanna have a decent place. There's so many people on assistance that the rest of us are like, well, we don't get a food card, we don't get, you know, things like that. But it seems overwhelming. You're very eloquent speaker, and you're a very good salesman, but that don't go from the part that we would love to have this if our county could afford it, but I don't think we can. I think we gotta, like she said, think outside the box. We need to find a cheap solution to this problem. There probably isn't one that's gonna fit it all, but it'll tide us through till we can figure out what we can do in the future.
Understood, appreciate the comment.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know.
Sorry, I was pointing behind you.
Oh,
She's
go
had her
ahead.
hand up before.
I have, because I've had a lot of things to say. Maybe I'll say a couple of them. First, I want to go on the record that being someone who's at these meetings all the time, I think the county should take the heat for not telling Flammable River Outfitters anything. Because for 6 months, we have been talking about demolishing the building that they are renting from us as landlords. And that is despicable. Second of all, I think that not sending out a letter to more people who are not taxpayers is not okay. Because there are a number of you in this room who will not finish paying for the jail, and there are people who are renters right now who will begin to pay for the jail, and they should have been notified to be here just as much as anyone else. I would like to also say, I was at the meeting that's proposed that you look at a $30 million jail, and we were never given a $30 million jail. We were given a $38.5 million jail. And I'm wanting to know, if I built a house, which I did, if I would have said to my builder that I want to build a $200,000 house, and he came to me with a $250,000, I would not do it, because that's not what my finances are. And when the chair of the ad hoc committee asks for a lower price jail, and you don't provide that estimate and tell us what we actually get for that amount of money, you are not doing your due diligence.
Appreciate your comment. Next person.
So I'm not exactly sure of your role in all this. I mean, you said you're just a dumb construction guy, which I don't believe. You seem pretty smart.
Probably getting a pretty good wage for
But
this.
I think, I don't know if there's anybody on the county board in this room. Okay. I would like to have, like, to the county board members, a meeting of all the county board members, maybe some of the city board members. Put that out there a little bit more instead of maybe dumping all these questions on this gentleman who can't answer all of our questions when it comes to specifics about our own county.
Yeah.
So that's to the county board members in this room.
So I guess I want to respond to that is, that's what county board meetings are for.
Right,
So
but
they do meet
you know,
monthly?
I'm a taxpayer,
Yep.
and I have multiple properties in this county. I did not get a letter from anybody saying that meetings were going on. I find out through the grapevine, and I can't always get to all of them. I would like the county board to be more proactive in getting information out. That's what I would like.
Okay, thank you. I saw a hand over here, did I miss it?
Also, there's very many new county board members that are gonna get thrown into this that really aren't up to speed of where you guys are at right now.
Oh, yeah,
After the election.
that'll definitely be part of, as they come in, or to kind of let you know what we're planning to do with this communication plan, is take all the information that we've gathered from all of you that have attended, all of you that have sent emails in, through the website, and we're gonna bring that to the full board, in April, and then we will follow up as they deem it appropriate to be able to give them information. You were spot on, there are some board members that are coming into this brand new, and, we'll be getting them information and obviously get them up to speed as to where we are. Yes, sir.
I just think some of the businesses in town are concerned with it. My property taxes in my office are over $15,000. My house is over $4,000. I'm almost at $20,000 in property taxes. You're kind of telling me that I'm gonna have to pay a lot more. That concerns me.
Nope, understand that. That's why we have these meetings, to get those concerns out there. The other thing is I want you to understand, you have a need here. There's gonna be a cost. If you think that there is a no-cost option, you are mistaken. So what the county board will be challenged with is to come up with what is the appropriate solution. Somebody mentioned linear. Somebody mentioned, let's get it out of the city. All these ideas come back to the group. Somebody mentioned, you didn't come up with a $30 million solution, you didn't do your job. The reality is that there are parameters in regards to what needs to be compliant with code and what is staff efficient. $30 million solution and meeting the parameters of what has to be done space-wise and code-wise is not an option. Whether you say we did our job or not, we evaluated those.
Give us less
elements that were
beds.
tied into that.
Give us less beds.
So,
Show us it's not
those things
possible.
that are-
Cut
those
3
things
million
that are
off that
tied into
stupid
those
Sky
elements-
Pass.
Do you remember how we talked about it being respectful? I would hope that we could end this meeting respectful, please. I've been given everybody a voice. Can we please continue that through the closure of this meeting? I would appreciate that. So from the county board's perspective, they have a tough job to do. They are going to have to deal with those situations, and it's not gonna be an easy decision, because there's gonna have to be, how are we gonna handle this operationally if we don't do something in regards to a borrowing? Or what are we gonna do with the borrowing, and what is a long-term solution? It won't be an easy decision. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to where you had the pod in with the linear,
Yeah, I might do it this way, maybe.
or with the existing jail?
The solution?
Yeah.
This one here?
Still, I think, no, the one where you had the pod right next to the original jail now. You're right there. Or, I mean, what is the problem with keeping it all in the same block? How much of the courthouse are we utilizing right now?
Oh, you mean keeping it on the city block?
Yeah, you got a big parking lot, well, I shouldn't say big, but you got parking lot on the north side, south side, or east side. But how much of the courthouse is actually being used right now?
So the issue with this one here, what we ran into, and I know it doesn't represent it well, every time we would try to put this pod in here, we were having to demolish some of that building, it wouldn't fit in there. The only one that actually fit in that side corner was if we would stack it, and that's where we ran into, that we would have one on the lower level, and then we would have the flow to add staff.
And how
That
much
was
is,
the configuration in regards to where that was.
how much is that
This one
designed?
right here, each one of these were in that upper 30 to mid 40s range, depending, because the demolition started to play a role. What was referenced in regards to displacing those, it's added cost. So if you want to isolate just jail costs, the program that's going to be needed, the square footage is going to be needed at 46,000. Most cost-effective way is at 46,000 square feet, build it alone, and find a cost-effective way to connect it without touching other pieces. The moment you start touching other pieces, the costs go up. Ma'am?
Are there any specific companies that actually have to build these pods, or is that something that goes out to a local
Yeah, so
business?
the way the project works is, if the project is approved, then the design will start. And then when you get to the construction documents, because you have public money, it's let out to all contractors. And when I say all contractors, we'll have contractors throughout the Midwest that will bid on this work. There are some key elements that are tied into that. There are correctional sites where they do the detention glass, they do the security electronics, but there's a multitude of those contractors that can bid it. So when it's bid, there will be an open bid opening. So all those contractors will bid on it. We'll read them aloud, typically at the county building, and then we take and qualify those contractors and bring them back to the board for recommendation.
But I'm assuming it's people that have built these pods before.
So you're gonna have some masons or some precast companies that they build more than just jails. It's not just a jail builder.
Right, okay.
So there are, it's an opportunity for local people to bid on it as well. Sir, did you have a comment? No? Yes, sir.
Why don't they close the road that's to the west, where the farmer's market is? Why don't they close that road and attach it to the building?
Yeah, there isn't enough real estate there to be able to encroach to put the pod there. And we were looking at, after the road closure topic came up, all these options were looking for a way not to close them. That was really the discussion point over there. Yes, ma'am.
Is there other companies that design these other than yours?
I'm not designing it, Corey is designing it.
Okay,
Yes,
I mean, you know, have we looked into other companies?
Yes, you actually did a RFP process.
I mean, we're not really notified, so we have to ask you guys these questions.
Yeah,
Cause as a, you know, a resident of our county, we don't know what the hell's going on till the last 5 seconds, and we gotta make this fast decision, so.
So the county board did an RFP process where they had requests for proposals for those companies that do this work to be able to provide it. So it was based on a competitive approach in regards to fee and then the deliverables that were there. So that's how we awarded it. So it has been vetted that way. Yes, sir.
Didn't you have a picture where the pod was right next to the jail now?
Yeah, I had a bunch of them here.
And you said it would be less you wouldn't have to do as much demolition? Right there, yeah.
That's actually taking more building down.
Yeah.
Because there is
Not what
building
you
right
said the
here.
first time, but.
This building right here then gets demoed. There's actually a communications radio tower that's there that we're trying to stay away from because that's added. Every time you have to move that radio tower, it's a big ticket item. So a lot of those options have been looked at. Yes, ma'am.
You've been meeting with the ad hoc committee on the new jail, correct? How long has that been going on?
About a year.
About a year. And everything you're telling us tonight has been discussed with our ad hoc committee members.
I wouldn't say everything. I haven't had this depth of a presentation, but all the
Okay,
options, all the options have been.
all the costs and everything, and we have 3 of those members here tonight, correct? So they could be answering some of the questions.
I'm sorry about the one answering the question. If you personally want them to answer a question, you can ask them.
So I'm just trying to take some heat off.
I don't mind it. I don't mind
I'm
it.
saying, we haven't been notified, they haven't been notified, this is not something that was discussed.
I wanna talk about the notification. Can I just be candid about the notification, and don't take it as I'm some sales guy, cause I'm not. That's no big deal, I'm not. The reality is the county board, all of what they're doing is done in public meetings. All of those public meetings, we have the individual in the back that's recorded them for you. She's been there, she said she's been there. They've all been there for you to listen to and attend.
They lack
So,
transparency.
I understand that those elements, you can say that you haven't heard about them, it's a matter of whether you choose to stay in tune with what's happening with your county. And I'm not saying that to defend the board, because it happens every time we come to these meetings, we didn't know what was going on. Well, by law, they have to do it in open meetings, and they do. So, to your point, I appreciate that comment. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, what kind of savings would be to butt it up across minor?
About $3 million.
You know, I mean, that, to me, that makes way more sense than putting, you know. I mean, it's one of those chunks of street that's a double block rather than a single block.
I appreciate the input. All right, so when we start to get a lot of discussion there, I'm wondering if we've answered all the questions. Are we to the point where?
In your design, are you considering solar and thermal for?
No. The consideration, when you start to run into solar heat, especially on a jail, is the consumption of what is in a jail. The solar doesn't be able to provide that, and the return on the investment on some of those solar components has been a real long return. Now, we can definitely look at that when we get into that design. We are not into that level of design yet. We can evaluate it, but a lot of times, especially where you are in your climate, it hasn't been effective. Now, we will explore it with the engineers, but I can tell you right now, the jails that we built in this area of the country, the math typically doesn't work out on the return.
What prevents the DOC long-term, there was 12 or 15 different classifications of just that, plus if you had a mass crime or something. What prevents them from down the road adding another 10, 20, 50, 80, or 200 classifications at some point?
So I should clarify, the DOC isn't the one dictating that.
Okay.
What the DOC says is that you have to objectively classify them. And what I mean by that is they're taking all these things into consideration. So to answer your question, I don't think the DOC is gonna come in and, hey, you have to deal with this situation. What may very well happen is something in society may prompt another classification for use to make that separation. And that's why when you look at the flexibility of that unit, as many of them as we can make in regards to those classification is the important component of design to prepare for the future. That's a great question. I think people want to know that. Yeah.
How many people in this room support this? Raise your hand. Okay, I really just curious, I wanna know. Okay. Well, I don't give a crap, it's my, I asked that.
So in order to keep order, if we wanna get into discussion, we can close the meeting, okay? But what I would say is that question has been raised at the last 2 meetings, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you what I have had happen after the meetings is that people have shared that they have gained more information from coming to the meeting. So thank you for coming, right? What I would ask you to do is give yourself some time to digest that. Because you're gonna walk out of here and say, man, what did that guy say? If you do, send the question to the website so that we can get a response and let the county board know that. You have the emails that are tied back into that. I don't want you to leave here and feel as though I didn't get a chance to raise my hand. This is about you digesting this, because we threw a lot of stuff at you. And you're gonna go, what about this, what about that, what about this? This is to promote that dialogue, so that individuals that say, I didn't know about it, can't say that. Because we said, come here, let's talk about it, get to your community. When you go to your fish fry, when you go to the convenience store, hey, you hear about the jail? Here's what I heard. And if a question comes up, tell them to go to the website, tell them to send the question in, start that. You guys can be responsible for getting that dialogue going. So, yes?
So I want to know what we really can change from the projected plan and the dollar amount. What can really change? Because we've looked at a lot of options and we've said why we can't do anything. And then we're having these meetings, which feels like we should have had these meetings long ago before we're even here. But we're basically told that we can't do any of these other options. So we're all gonna have opinions and wonder why, and we're gonna be answered. But I'm curious to know, after going to 3 meetings, how we're really gonna ever end up with a different option than the one that's here. So we can tell our board members, but what are they gonna be able to do?
Here are the things that could change. If the decision is made that we're okay with a linear remodel and a linear design, with having more operating costs, that could change the impact. If the decision is made, we're gonna reduce our bed count to something less than we have right now, which we wouldn't recommend, but you have the right to make that decision. Because some people in here say, we look at our history, we only have 30 beds, we're only gonna build a 30-bed jail. And everybody gets on that boat and says, let's build a 30-bed jail, your price will go down. What you have to understand is that with those kind of decisions, you gotta carry the weight of what that looks like in the future. So when you look at history, you look at projections, you say we're only gonna build a 30-bed jail, but 5 years from now, you're still having out-of-county expenses, that's a decision you have to live with. So those are decisions that if people come back and say, we want a $30 million option, even though when you look at the life cycle of the building, it's gonna cost you more over the life of that. Those are things that can be considered.
But we didn't actually ever see that.
Understand, appreciate the comment. Yes,
No, you really don't.
Is it possible
I mean-
that Rusk County and Barron County might establish a reciprocity agreement where those classifications, you're consuming a lot of space. If we've got one classification that's gonna take 10 day rooms or 10 whatever, and we've got 2 of those people, could we not just share with Barron County one of those people to enhance? So what I'm trying to say is, could we actually get by with a smaller number, smaller jail, with a reciprocity agreement with a neighboring county?
So that
they've got the same dilemma as we do.
So there was a similar comment made at another county, and the comment that individual had was, the solution is we have 72 counties, and everybody has their own classification, so that Rusk would only hold the max male. You know what I'm saying, is that was an idea. So when we have these brainstorming sessions like that question came up. And real quickly, that makes some sense. The reality is that if you have 15, 16, 17 different classifications, and let's say that your medium female is in Milwaukee County, now every one of your trips goes down to Milwaukee County from Ladysmith. It starts to become not cost effective. When you're doing a neighboring county, and I'll tell you right now, what you're talking about is something that can be a stopgap if you have a situation where there is a conflict with an officer, like if there is a relationship with an officer, a CO, some of those have to be moved. But it's not something that can be sustainable in regards to that management of the population to about food. But it's definitely something that can be done from a stopgap.
In that same context, the bordering counties around Russ County, how many of them are having similar issues?
Washburn, as it is right next to Washburn is dealing with them. The other ones I'm not aware of that they're dealing with those situations. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I suppose this is for Jeff. Is there a plan to rent bed space if this goes through?
If the project goes through and we open at 60, and we're not at capacity, or if they approve the double bunking and we have space, maybe for 10 years, yeah, we would bring people in if we could.
Well, by his numbers, what it costs that we'd be receiving, I'm assuming the same as what we'd be spending, where would that money go? Will that come off our tax roll, or?
Back into the county fund, whether it's. But we did not design this or consider this to make revenue. We built this for Russ County and for the future as it comes. Like you said earlier, yeah, there might be a chance for a little while that we can bring a few in, rent out a few beds and make a little bit of money. But in time, that should go away. So we're not building this anticipating bringing in revenue.
The reason I asked that, Jeff, is there's a rumor out there that says that's why they're gonna do it. They wanna bring all these prisoners in here, rent it out. That's the rumor that's out there, so I just wanted you to clear that up.
Okay, I know we've kept you here for over 2 hours. I want to thank you for coming here. Again, if there's questions coming out of this that weren't answered, please utilize the resources that you have there. And again, we'll be presenting this to the board here in the future, so thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.